Good morning and welcome to the 9th meeting of the Education, Children, Young People Committee in 2026, and we've received apologies this morning from Willie Rennie. The first item today is subordinate legislation being considered under the negative procedure, which is the Education Fees and Student Support Miscellaneous Amendment Scotland Regulations 2026. Do members have any comments to make about this instrument? No. Is the committee agreed that it does not wish to make any recommendations in relation to this instrument? That is agreed. Our next item of business is Stage 2 proceedings on the Restraint and Seclusion in Schools Scotland Bill. I'd like to welcome Daniel Johnson, the member in charge, along with his supporting officials, and the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills, along with her supporting officials, to the meeting this morning. I remind members that officials seated at the table are here to support the member in charge and the Cabinet Secretary, but are not able to speak in the debates on amendments. Members should therefore direct their comments to the member in charge or the Cabinet Secretary. Before we begin, I will briefly explain the procedure we will be following this morning for anyone who is watching. The amendments that have been lodged on the bill have been grouped together. There will be one debate on each group of amendments. All of the amendments have been lodged by the member in charge of the bill. I will therefore call Daniel Johnson to speak and move the first amendment and speak to any other amendment in the group. Other members who wish to speak should catch my attention. The debate on the group will be concluded by me inviting Daniel Johnson to wind up. Following the debate on each group, I will check whether Daniel Johnson wishes to press the first amendment in the group to a vote or to withdraw. If he wishes to press ahead, I will put the question on that amendment. If he wishes to withdraw his amendment after it has been moved, he must seek the agreement of other members to do so. If any member objects, the committee immediately moves to a vote on the amendment. If Daniel Johnson does not want to move an amendment when called, he should say not move. Please note that any other member present may move such an amendment. If no one moves the amendment, I will immediately call the next amendment on the marshalled list. Only committee members are allowed to vote. Voting in any division will be by a show of hands, and it's important that members keep their hands clearly raised until the clerks have recorded the vote, and the committee is required to indicate formally that it has considered and agreed each section of the bill, and so I will put the question on each section at the appropriate point. And now we have covered the procedure we will follow today, we will move to the substantive business, and I call Amendment 1 in the name of Daniel Johnson, group with Amendments 2, 3, 7 and 23, and I call on Daniel Johnson to move Amendment 1 and speak to all amendments in the group. Mr Johnson.
Thank you very much, Convener. And just very briefly before I address the amendments in Group 1, can I just again reiterate my thanks to the committee for their detailed work at Stage 1. I hope overall in the course of this morning you will see that I have addressed, I think, most of the substantive concerns set out in the Stage 1 report, and indeed I've also written separately about regarding some of the other amendments. And I would also like to thank the Government for their detailed and engaged dialogue with me and the Non-Governmental Bills Unit. Overall, with regard to Group 1, which is concerning the meaning and recording of restraint and seclusion, the approach of this bill has to provide clarity through the scope, and that's very much the focus of the definitions, but recognising that practice needs to be steered by nuance, and that is very much the concern and focus of the guidance. I am aware of the concerns that were raised about whether or not that clarity of scope was sufficient in terms of the definitions that were provided, which is why I have brought forward these amendments at Stage 2. And principally, amendments 3, 7 and 23, I believe, provide both that clarity, but also the assurances that the guidance will provide the clarity in terms of that nuance of practice that is required. Amendment 3 inserts the word significantly into the definition, such that it reads a significant restriction of physical movement, so that this makes clear that the definition only captures meaningful or material restrictions on a child's movement. This ensures that minor, incidental or fleeting physical contact does not fall within the statutory definition of restraint. So, practices such as holding a child's hand while walking down the road, or the supportive hand on the shoulder as a child goes on stage for a school assembly, are clearly not significant restrictions of physical movement and therefore outside the scope, and I think it's important to have that clarification. Amendments 1 and 2 are minor drafting amendments to help clarify these matters. Amendment 7 requires that statutory guidance include an explanation of what constitutes significantly restricting physical movement in terms of Amendment 3. The bill already provides that statutory guidance can elaborate on the definitions of restraint and seclusion as set out in section 2.4. In other words, there was nothing preventing Scottish ministers from explaining this in guidance to the bill, but this amendment does ensure that the ministers are required to do so explicitly. So alongside section 2.4, this provides the additional opportunity for examples to be provided in the guidance of what does and does not constitute restraint and seclusion for the purpose of the bill, as recommended by the committee. It ensures that all education providers receive clear statutory guidance on the threshold for significant restriction within the definition of restraint, supporting consistent interpretation and application of the legislation. Finally, Amendment 23 gives Scottish ministers the power to exempt categories of restraint and seclusion from recording and reporting requirements. The amendment enables Scottish ministers to specify by regulations, subject to consultation and the affirmative procedure, types of restraint or seclusion that need not be recorded or reported. This will allow proportionate exemptions for physical interventions that are not of obvious concern, would not warrant formal data collection. I think overall what these amendments do...
Would the member give way?
Absolutely.
I'm grateful to the member for giving way. I just wonder what his response is to the Children and Young People's Commissioner for Scotland's letter yesterday saying that they oppose Amendments 3, 7 and 23, and if he would like to put on record his thoughts about their opposition, their reasoning for their opposition and any mitigations he believes are in place to respond to the points that they have articulated.
I think particularly on, first of all, Amendment 3, I think the insertion of the word significantly and the tightening up the definition, I think, is important. I think, as we had the discussion in my Stage 1 evidence, I think providing clarity of what is in scope and what is not is very important. I think the word significant does usefully do that. I think particularly Amendment 7, ensuring that there is actually clarification within the guidance of what that means, I think is very important. And finally, on Amendment 23, and I do understand the concerns raised by the Children's Commissioner, but I think what this amendment does is rather than require the government to exempt, it enables them to do it. I think throughout the discussion of this bill, both in front of this committee and out with, there has been a very strong voice about the need for balance. We are talking about things that are there are absolutely benign and reasonable practices that we would not want to capture. There are also very serious ones that we absolutely must, but there also needs to be balance and nuance. What we wouldn't want to do is have the inability, if there are any practices that are inadvertently caught by the definitions, to be able to fine-tune or recalibrate this. What Amendment 23 does that. But I would also emphasise the fact that this would be subject to both consultation and also the affirmative procedure, so that if the government were to bring forward any exemptions for either restraint or seclusion, that would be subject to public consultation, it would be subject to parliamentary scrutiny and would be subject to a parliamentary vote. I think that's a balanced and proportionate approach, but critically means that we have legislation that would enable Parliament and the government to calibrate this should concerns arise following its passing. And that was actually at the end of my introductory remarks for the group, and I move Amendment 1 in my name.
Thank you very much. Cabinet Secretary.
Convener, I want to thank Daniel Johnson for working with me to lodge a package of amendments which strengthen the bill. The amendments on the definition of restraint were requested by the committee and by stakeholders because the original one used in the bill was considered to be too broad. So the definition of restraint will continue to be based on restricting a pupil's movement, as we've heard from Mr Johnson, but Amendment 1 makes clear that it must involve physical contact. Amendment 3 ensures that the intention of that contact must be to significantly restrict the pupil's movement, and that allows us to distinguish restraint from everyday supportive contact, as I think we've also heard from Mr Johnson. And Amendment 7 provides for what is significant to be set out through statutory guidance. The ministerial regulation power in Amendment 23 will provide that increased flexibility to adjust recording and reporting requirements in future to reflect developing policy. Convener, these amendments strike the right balance. They preserve the Bill's broad protective definitions, its presumption that restraint and seclusion should be recorded, while enabling future provisions to address any unintended over-reporting issues that may arise, and I invite the committee to support them.
Thank you. I call on Daniel Johnson to wind up, if he has anything to add.
I have no further comments.
Thank you very much. The question is that Amendment 1 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendment 2 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 1. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Move formally.
The question is that Amendment 2 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendment 3 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 1. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Move.
The question is that Amendment 3 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendment 4 in the name of Daniel Johnson, group with amendments as shown in the groupings. Daniel Johnson to move Amendment 4 and speak to all amendments in the group. Mr Johnson.
Thank you very much, Convener. Amendments 4 through 6, 8, 9, 11 through 14, 28 and 32 collectively replace references to child or young person with the term pupil, which is the same, which is given the same meaning as in the Education Scotland Act 1980. These amendments respond to an issue identified by the Children and Young People's Commissioner at Stage 1, which I discussed with the Cabinet Secretary in preparation for Stage 2. The purpose of these amendments is to ensure that all children and young people who attend school are fully covered by the Bill's provisions and associated statutory guidance. In particular, and the issue that this focuses on, was the fact that children of the age of 4 commencing primary 1 might not have been captured by the bill. So this now, by bringing it in line with the definition of child, with the definition of pupil, means that they will be included within the bill's scope.
Are you
yes, and I move Amendment 4.
Thank you very much. I call the Cabinet Secretary.
Convener, these amendments are technical in nature. However, they do carry meaningful implications by guaranteeing that all pupils are afforded the same protections by the bill. This issue was raised with Daniel Johnson by the Children and Young People's Commissioner, as has been mentioned, and shared with the Government for consideration. And I'm grateful to the Commissioner and her team for raising this point. The original terminology in the bill risked unintentionally excluding 4-year-old children who are attending school from the protections that the bill is designed to provide. And I welcome Daniel Johnson's proposed solution to use the Education Scotland 1980 Act definition of a pupil throughout the bill, and I encourage members to support these amendments.
Thank you. Daniel Johnson to wind up.
No further comment.
Thank you very much. The question is that Amendment 4 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendment 5 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 4. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Move.
The question is that Amendment 5 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendment 6 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 4. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Move.
The question is that Amendment 6 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. The question is that Section 1 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendments 7, 8 and 9, all in the name of Daniel Johnson, all previously debated. I invite Daniel Johnson to move the Amendments 7 to 9 on block.
Moved. En bloc.
Thank you very much. Does any member object to a single question being put on Amendments 7 to 9? No member objects. Therefore, the question is that Amendments 7 to 9 are agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendment 10 in the name of Daniel Johnson in a group of its own. Daniel Johnson to move and speak to Amendment 10. Mr Johnson.
So this grouping has a single amendment, Amendment 10, relating to the consultation requirements for the creation of statutory guidance. Amendment 10 adds children and young people to the list of statutory consultees. It ensures that experiences of young children and young people inform the development of the guidance or any revised guidance. This amendment gives effect to the committee's recommendation that consultation should include direct consultation with children and young people. The committee also recommended that it should include consultation with grant-aided special schools and independent schools. It is expected that these schools would be consulted as part of the existing requirement in the bill to consult with education providers, so an amendment is not necessary to allow this to happen. And I move Amendment 10 in my name.
Thank you very much. Cabinet Secretary.
Amendment, it adds children and young people to the list of statutory consultees who ministers must engage with before issuing or revising guidance under Section 2. The bill already requires consultation with education providers, parents' representatives, trade unions and the Children and Young People's Commissioner. However, as I highlighted in my memorandum to the committee in June of last year, children and young people themselves were omitted. I am pleased that the committee agreed with me on this in its Stage 1 report and recommended that the voices of children and young people must be explicitly recognised in this process. This amendment ensures that all of those affected by the statutory guidance are actively involved in its development. It also reflects our commitment to meaningful participation in line with the expectations of the UNCRC. The wording children and young people rather than pupils here ensures the requirement captures those who have recently left school or who are temporarily not in school but whose experiences remain highly relevant. And I encourage members to support Amendment 10.
Thank you. I call on Daniel Johnson to wind up.
And no further comment.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 10 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. The question is that Section 2 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendments 11, 12, 13 and 14, all in the name of Daniel Johnson and all previously debated. I invite Daniel Johnson to move Amendments 11 to 14 en bloc.
Moved en bloc.
Thank you very much. Does any member object to a single question being put on Amendments 11 to 14? No member objects. So the question is that Amendments 11 to 14 are agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. I call Amendment 15 in the name of Daniel Johnson, group with Amendments 16 and 18. I call on Daniel Johnson to move Amendment 15 and speak to all amendments in the group. Mr Johnson.
Thank you very much, Convener. I think one of the points where I was absolutely agreed with the committee when I was giving evidence at stage 1 was that it's vital that parents, carers, guardians are informed as quickly and as efficiently as possible whenever such incidents occur. I think the question was how best to capture that in legislation. You certainly, as framed, the bill currently requires that that's no later than 24 hours after the incident occurred. But the committee was of the view that same-day notification should be the norm. So this group of amendments gives effect to the committee's recommendation. Amendment 15 relates to the timing of parental notification. It makes clear that parents must be informed by the end of the school day on which the incident occurred, or where that is not reasonably practicable within 24 hours of the incident. In consequence of Amendment 15, Amendment 18 creates a statutory definition of end of the school day to avoid ambiguity in applying notification duties. Amendment 16 allows parents to nominate another person to be notified of restraint or seclusion. This will provide families with greater flexibility in how information is conveyed where a parent cannot be contacted. If the parent indicates that another person may be notified, the school may comply with the notification duty by informing that other person instead of the parent. So, as a whole, I believe these amendments strike that balance between that very efficient information with some of the reasonable adjustments that may be required given particular circumstances. And I move Amendment 15 in my name.
Thank you very much. Cabinet Secretary.
Convener, I welcome these amendments. They strengthen the notification requirements in Section 3 of the bill, which were discussed during Stage 1 of the bill process, and ensure that there are clear and robust timelines for reporting of incidents. At present, the bill requires schools to notify parents or carers as soon as possible and in any event within 24 hours, which differs from our 2024 guidance. Now, concerns were also raised at Stage 1 that the provision does not sufficiently prioritise same-day notification. So Amendments 15 and 18 address this by making clear that parents or carers should normally be notified before the end of the school day unless an alternative arrangement has been agreed. An exception is included for circumstances where same-day notification is not practicable, but notification must still occur within 24 hours. Amendment 16 seeks to bring clarity in relation to looked after children. It ensures that notification is made to the appropriate corporate parent or carer responsible for the child, preventing any risk or wrongful disclosure, and I would encourage the committee to support these amendments.
Thank you. I call on Daniel Johnson to wind up.
I have no further comments, Commissioner.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 15 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendment 16 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 15. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 16 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendment 17 in the name of Daniel Johnson, grouped with Amendments 27, 29, 30 and 31. Daniel Johnson to move Amendment 17 and speak to all amendments in the group. Mr Johnson.
Thank you very much, Convener. So Amendments 17, 27, 29, 30 and 31 all pertain to regulations regarding commencement. I think it's fair to say with any member's bill, a member will always want their bill to be enacted as quickly as possible, and the government will always want time to get its affairs into order. And I think that's very reasonable. So I think these amendments strike that balance between ensuring that we put into effect the provisions of this bill as speedily as possible, but also that we get the detail and the preparation right. This group includes amendments that make provision related to regulating making powers for the commencement, and minor amendments intended to tidy up language. Amendment 17 and Amendment 27 are minor amendments which tidy up drafting of the bill to remove the words or control from sections 33A and 61A, which are superfluous. Amendment 29 creates a new section relating to the regulating making powers in the bill. It specifies that the regulation making powers include the power to make different provision for different purposes or different areas. In addition, regulations other than the ancillary provision regulations are subject to the affirmative procedure. This section does not apply to commencement regulations, which will be provided for by Amendment 31. Amendment 30 creates a new section giving the Scottish Ministers the power to make incidental, supplementary and consequential transitionary, transitory or saving provision for the purposes of or in connection with the Act. The effect is to provide a standard ancillary power with the affirmative procedure required where primary legislation is amended. Amendment 31 amends the commencement provisions in the bill. This follows my discussions with the Cabinet Secretary of the Committee's recommendation that the future Act should not commence until the review of the current non-statutory guidance has been undertaken. The amendment provides for the commencement of the regulation making powers, ancillary powers in Section 8, short title, on the day after royal assent. The substantive provisions, sections 1 to 5, will be commenced by regulations which must be made no later than the 31st of July 2028. This will allow ministers time to prepare for the commencement of the Act, while also providing a deadline by which commencement regulations must be made. Thank you.
And can you move Amendment 17?
I'm sorry, and I move Amendment 17 in my name.
Thank you very much. Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Daniel Johnson for these pragmatic amendments. Amendments 29 and 30 are standard provisions, ensuring that the bill works as intended in light of changes made by other amendments, and I'm happy to support them. I'm also pleased that, having discussed the question of commencement with Mr Johnson, we've been able to agree on a practical and workable way forward. We agree with the committee's recommendation from stage 1 that the Act should not commence until the review of the current non-statutory guidance is complete. That review is currently underway, and we agree with the chosen backstop date of July 2028. I anticipate that commencement could take place before this date, as we would begin work to implement the bill as soon as it becomes law. And I would encourage members to support all amendments in this group.
Thank you. I call on Daniel Johnson to wind up.
No further comment.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 17 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendment 18 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 15. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 18 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. The question is that Section 3 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That is agreed. I call Amendment 19 in the name of Daniel Johnson, group with Amendments 20, 21 and 22. Daniel Johnson to move Amendment 19 and speak to all amendments in the group. Mr Johnson.
Thank you. At stage 1, the committee recommended that independent and grant-aided schools should report directly to the Scottish Government rather than to the local authority in which it is situated. Amendment 19 gives effect to this recommendation by redirecting reporting obligations from local authorities to the Scottish Ministers for the schools not managed by local authorities. Amendment 20 is a minor amendment to tidy up to ensure the provision reads correctly in consequence of Amendment 19. Amendment 21 is intended to clarify the scope of local authority reporting. It amends Section 4.3 to specify that each education authority must report incidences of restraint and seclusion in schools under its management rather than in its area. This amendment is consequential to Amendment 19, which changes the reporting requirements in relation to independent and grant-aided schools. It clarifies that an education authority's duty applies only to schools it manages and aligns terminology with Section 6. Finally, for this group, Amendment 22 arose from my discussions with the Cabinet Secretary and relates to the committee's conclusion that there is a role for HMIE in the implementation of the bill. I have already written to the committee on this matter. The amendment creates a regulation-making power that will allow ministers to require education providers to report incidents of restraint or seclusion to a person specified in regulations and to set out operational detail such as timescales and format. This amendment gives the Scottish Ministers the option of establishing a duty for the schools to report each incident in real time to a suitable national body such as Inspectorate of Education, once ongoing discussions about HMIE's remit have concluded. This would align with existing Care Inspectorate incident reporting arrangements and proposed Mental Welfare Commission reporting requirements for restraint in certain settings. This system would allow the relevant national body to identify and act upon immediate wellbeing concerns, whether arising from a single incident or patterns of repeated use of restraint or seclusion. And I move Amendment 19 in my name.
Thank you very much. Cabinet Secretary.
Amendments 19 and 20 make simple but important changes to the reporting arrangements in Section 4 of the Bill. Under the Bill, as introduced, independent and grant-aided schools would be required to submit their restraint and seclusion data to the Education Authority in whose area they are physically located. And this approach, as the committee will be aware, created an unnecessary step in data handling and risked distorting local authority statistical returns. So to address this, Amendment 19 ensures that independent and grant-aided schools report directly to Scottish Ministers and will streamline the system. The power for Scottish Ministers in Amendment 22 will allow the development and alignment of national reporting requirements for restraint and seclusion across children's services over time. At present, the Bill requires education providers to submit annual returns to ministers, and while that remains appropriate for now, we recognise that it may be desirable in future for more immediate incident-level reporting, thereby strengthening national oversight to the protection of children's wellbeing. This approach provides time to implement the Bill's annual reporting provisions and assess their impact before considering the next steps. I hope members can see the long-term benefits in these amendments and will be able to support them.
Thank you. I call Daniel Johnson to wind up.
No further comment.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 19 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yeah. That is agreed. I call Amendments 20, 21, 22 and 23, all in the name of Daniel Johnson and all previously debated. I invite Daniel Johnson to move Amendments 20 to 23 en bloc.
Moved en bloc.
Thank you. Does any member object to a single question being put on Amendments 20 to 23? No member objects, so the question is that Amendments 20 to 23 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. The question is that Section 4 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. I call Amendment 24 in the name of Daniel Johnson Group with Amendments 25 and 26. Daniel Johnson to move Amendment 24 and speak to all amendments in the group. Mr Johnson.
Thank you very much, Convener. Following my discussions with the Cabinet Secretary, the amendments in this group strengthen the training provisions in the Bill. At Stage 1, some stakeholders suggested the development of training standards alongside the improved list of training providers as set out in the Bill as introduced. In its report, the committee recommended that the approved training providers on the list must be quality assured and certified training providers. In response to those views, Amendment 24 creates a new subsection of Section 5, which enables ministers to develop training standards for the use of restraint and seclusion in schools and to maintain both a list of recognising training standards developed by others and a list of providers who meet those standards. Amendment 25 removes the existing subsection 1 of Section 5, which becomes unnecessary due to the expanded provision to be introduced by Amendment 24. Amendment 26 requires Scottish Ministers to publish any training standards and lists they maintain, ensuring transparency. For the avoidance of doubt, it is not expected that all teachers and school staff will require training on restraint techniques. I have written to the committee on this matter. The provision of professional learning is a matter for local authorities, who are the employer of teachers and other classroom practitioners, and the Bill does not propose to change that. It is expected that relevant teachers and staff would understand de-escalation in the first instance, and the smaller number of those who may need to use restraint techniques as a last resort are provided with training on appropriate safe techniques to minimise the risk of any physical or mental injury. The specifics of this would be determined through bespoke training and needs analysis in relevant school settings for those practitioners that would reasonably be expected to need it. And I move Amendment 24 in my name.
Thank you. Cabinet Secretary.
Convener, Section 5, as drafted, requires ministers to maintain and publish a list of approved training providers and the details of their courses. However, there are already well-recognised and established national frameworks and training standards in place, including the Restraint Reduction Network standards, which are widely used and which are also referenced in the 2024 guidance. It would be unhelpful for the Bill to cut across good practice or to create an overly rigid system. Therefore, as we have heard, Amendments 24, 25 and 26 seek to address these concerns, and I thank Daniel Johnson for lodging them and explaining their intent. These amendments give ministers flexibility to develop new training standards or adopt existing ones and to publish information about providers in the most appropriate way. This approach avoids unnecessary duplication while also still ensuring transparency and consistency. It strikes the right balance between maintaining high standards and allowing the system to evolve as practice develops. And I invite the committee to support these amendments.
Thank you. I call on Daniel Johnson to wind up.
And no further comment.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 24 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. I call Amendment 25 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 24. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 25 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? I call Amendment 26 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 24. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 26 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. The question is that Section 5 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. I call Amendment 27 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 17. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 27 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. I call Amendment 28 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 4. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 28 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. The question is that Section 6 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. I call Amendments 29, 30 and 31, all in the name of Daniel Johnson and all previously debated. I invite Daniel Johnson to move Amendments 29 to 31 en bloc.
Moved en bloc.
Thank you. Does any member object to a single question being put on Amendments 29 to 31? No member objects. So the question is that Amendments 29 to 31 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. The question is that Section 7 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Thank you. That's agreed. The question is that Section 8 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. I call Amendment 32 in the name of Daniel Johnson, already debated with Amendment 4. Daniel Johnson to move formally.
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 32 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. The question is that the long title be agreed to. Are we all agreed? That is agreed. And that concludes consideration of the bill at stage 2. Can I thank the member in charge, Daniel Johnson, and the Cabinet Secretary and their supporting officials for their attendance at the meeting today. The committee will now move into private session to consider our final agenda item, and I suspend this meeting. Thank you.